Deadly Skies introduces the player to a spectacular take on air combat, with over 30 diverse types of planes at your disposal and a campaign that spans over 20 missions. There is a lot to get stuck into. As the player, you assume the role of a mercenary that has been drafted to tackle the growing threat of a rebel group intent on conquering the land. As a hired hand, you are rewarded upon completing each mission with money that can be used to acquire more powerful aircrafts, both in terms of firepower as well as maneuverability. This aspect of the experience acts as the main hook of Deadly Skies, with the acquisition of new machines being essential to progression due to each mission's increasing difficulty. But to make matters worse, failure is not simply failure. The player will forever lose any purchased aircraft if it is lost whilst on a mission. This aspect lends the game a real sense of urgency and forces the player to think carefully on how they approach each situation. Deadly Skies shares many similarities with the popular Ace Combat series, with the gameplay possessing a distinct arcade flavour, making it easier than ever for players of all levels to jump in and feel right at home. Pen is a fairly unique racing experience that sees the player taking control of incredibly cute characters known as Pen-Pens. This society lives on an ice planet, with most of them passing the time by running, swimming and sliding around. Because of this, the idea of a yearly event known as the Triathlon was conceived. This sees the various Pen-Pens competing against each other in order to be crowned #1. Now there's several characters available right from the beginning, with some being unlocked as you progress through the game. As mentioned, the main aspect of the society's life is central to each race, which sees you running, swimming and sliding in order to advance and ultimately win each race. It's a pretty simple setup that allows players of all ages to jump into the action and instantly feel comfortable. Upon its initial release, it received pretty mixed reviews, but in all honesty, it has aged really well and will provide you with an experience that is bound to leave a smile on your face. Donald Duck Quack Attack sees you taking up the role of the classic character in an adventure that spans up to 28 levels set over 4 distinctly designed worlds, such as Ducky Mountain, Duckburg, a manor and finally a temple. There's a great amount of diversity present in each level, which manages to help the experience maintain a fresh feeling from start to finish. Adding to this is the inclusion of bonus stages that task you with outrunning a variety of enemies that break up the regular beat-to-beat gameplay. Now the action mainly takes place from a 3D perspective, but the game will quite often flip it to a 2D side-scrolling position whilst playing, with the gameplay style also shifting accordingly. Visually, Donald Duck Quack Attack is stunning, bringing life to each character on screen and each location that will make many Disney fans feel right at home. If you're stuck for interesting platformers on the Dreamcast, Donald Duck Quack Attack has got you covered. After an event known as the Backlash that saw the world thrown into chaos, the environments of Dragon's Blood World are now inhabited by disgusting creatures summoned by a twisted shaman known as Raka. The aim of the experience is to ultimately unite everyone that now shares the world and take down Raka before his goal of acquiring powerful ancient magic is fulfilled. Presented as a hack and slash, the action takes place from a third-person perspective, with the emphasis being on defense instead of balls-out attacking. It's an interesting spin on the usual experience you would expect from the genre. The journey is spread over 15 stages that present various locations and enemy types to overcome. It's overall a quite linear experience, but at certain points in the game you are presented with a choice of levels that provide a slight change of pace upon future playthroughs. At the beginning of the adventure, the choice of 2 characters are available to the player, each with their own attributes, with one being more proficient in hand-to-hand combat and the latter having greater skill at summoning magic. A nice aspect of the experience is the progression of these characters. At the end of each stage you are rewarded with points that can be spent in order to upgrade your abilities and effectiveness. Overall, Dragon's Blood is a highly enjoyable experience that deserves a place in your library if you've yet to give it a go. Taking place in an apocalyptic future that's seen most of the galaxy taken over by an evil alien race, humans have come up with a way to combat them through the use of a scientifically produced super soldier known as Millennium Soldiers. If there was one word to easily describe the game, that word would be mayhem. The action will keep you on your toes as it throws endless waves of enemies and challenges at you level after level. With its simple arcade premise, it becomes easy to fall in love with the game's pick up and play nature that will see you coming back to it time and time again. Gameplay-wise, the amount of options available to the player is a welcome addition, with a huge amount of weapons being available to take down the hordes of targets, as well as the ability to hold up to 3 weapons at a time, keeping the minute-to-minute action feeling fresh as you find yourself quickly cycling through weapons and strategies in order to deal with each threat on the fly. It really lends a truly frantic pace to the proceedings, which is perfect for an experience like this. Visually, Rage Software managed to pull off an excellent job, with the frame rate remaining consistent regardless of the on-screen action. Admittedly, the textures are a bit subpar, but when put into context with the absolute mayhem the game offers, it's still quite impressive. If you've yet to try out Millennium Soldier, it's currently available for quite a cheap price, so now is the perfect time to add this gem to your collection. From the same mind that brought us Indigo Prophecy and Heavy Rain, Nomad Soul introduces the player to a futuristic city known as Omnicron. The narrative focuses around a string of murders that are currently unsolved, with the police force tasking the protagonist to travel to Omnicron to ultimately solve the mystery behind the killings. Now admittedly, the narrative is not the strongest point of the experience, and is presented in a fashion that is extremely hard to follow, but this does not detract from what the game gets right, which is mainly its atmosphere and gameplay. The action generally takes place from a third-person perspective whilst exploring each environment, but switches between views during combat and even sometimes a side-on view, which really helps to immerse the player in the world. Progression is tied to conversing with NPCs, who will provide you with useful information pertaining to your investigation, as well as reading messages and collecting items that help flesh out the narrative and the world built around it. One standout aspect of the experience though has to be the soundtrack, which was created by the late David Bowie and Reeves Gabrels, with the former even appearing in the game as a character named Boz, which can be seen performing the music in and around the city. It's a nice touch, especially for fans of Bowie's music. If you're fond of Quantic Dream's later games such as Beyond Two Souls and Detroit, it's interesting to go back and see where it all began. Although not a perfect experience by any means, Nomad Soul is still an intriguing title that will satisfy those looking for an interesting narrative and world to get stuck into. Initially released on the PC in 1999, it wasn't until a year later that Infogram's Silver came to the Sega Dreamcast. The game's events revolve around a location known as Jirah, which is overseen by an evil entity known as Silver. Upon ordering his army to capture all of the women in the land to ultimately choose a wife, our main protagonist takes center stage. Known as Dave, his wife Jennifer has been kidnapped by the evil forces of Silver, and as the player it is your task to rescue Jennifer and bring an end to Silver's evil scheme. The action takes place against pre-rendered backgrounds, with character models being represented in 3D. The visual style lends much from medieval times, which in all honesty adds a really nice visual aesthetic to the proceedings. But what really helps Silver stand out is the real-time battling system that sees the player taking control of one of the many characters in your party, with the rest being handled by the game's AI. As with most RPG experiences, you'll be leveling up, finding or earning a multitude of weapons, abilities and items in order to aid you along the way. It's a pretty sizable adventure that sees you traversing a wide array of unique locations whilst meeting a huge cast of characters and NPCs that lend a real weight to the world and narrative that is presented. Silver landed pretty well under the radar upon its release. With the likes of Final Fantasy VIII and Baldur's Gate to compete with, it's easy to see why. But in our opinion, it stands shoulder to shoulder with its contemporaries and offers one of the finest RPG experiences on the system. Red Dog plunges the player into the driver's seat of an extremely agile tank, which possesses some serious firepower. A whole host of contraptions and abilities are at your disposal: shields, lasers, turbo boosters, missiles, as well as various other nifty gadgets that will even the odds against the hordes of enemies that are thrown at you. Gameplay wise, everything is fluid and responsive, allowing you to take on each mission with the confidence of knowing that the only way you'll make a mistake is through either a bad decision or a lack of firepower. A real sense of progression is afforded to the experience, with most of the tank's abilities being unlocked through the completion of special challenge missions that allows you to upgrade your arsenal. They can get pretty tough, but ultimately reward the player with essential items that soon become central to emerging victorious. Once you've exhausted the extensive single player options, Red Dog's superior firepower also consists of various multiplayer modes, which to be honest is where the game truly shines. There are 7 in total, ranging from standard deathmatch to more intricate objectives such as bomb tag, with a total of 15 maps to wreak havoc upon as well. It really adds to the overall replayability and value of the experience. If you've yet to give this little gem a go, now is the perfect time. Taking place several hundred years into the future, Slave Zero introduces the player to a sinister, dystopian world which is ruled by a person known as Liu Chen, more commonly known as Sovkhan. In order to keep this regime in place, a powerful army has been created by the Sovkhan, which utilizes incredibly huge robots. With the size of the army growing day by day, it's up to a small band of resistance fighters known as the Guardians, who have managed to capture one of these robots and use it to their advantage. By downloading the mind of a specially trained Guardian into the machine, it soon becomes the Guardian's only hope of bringing an end to Sovkhan's reign over the world. The gameplay is pretty straightforward and doesn't take much time to get used to. Many options are afforded to the player with a diverse set of weapons and abilities on offer, but where the game really comes into its own though is the inclusion of boss battles. Working out each of their attack and movement patterns becomes essential to taking them down, which is accompanied by that incredible feeling of finally emerging victorious. Super Magnetic Neo sees the player taking up the role of the main character, known as Neo, who possesses the ability to generate a magnetic field which serves as the game's main hook. The narrative revolves around bringing down the main antagonist known as Pinky and his gang of rebels who are intent on creating havoc for the citizens of the world. The experience consists of 4 worlds that sees the player travelling to various themed locations ranging from jungles to the Wild West, which all manage to convey their own unique style. With 4 worlds in total, each made up of 4 levels and a boss encounter, there is plenty to get stuck into, as well as 5 separate difficulty settings that amp up the mayhem and test your skills as you progress through them. As mentioned, the main crux of the game is the idea of manipulating the magnetic field created by Neo. The field can be generated in both a positive or negative manner that corresponds with the on-screen enemies and obstacles that block your path. For example, by using a negative charge, it's possible to bounce off enemies using the same, and as you can imagine, when using the opposite charge, you are instead attracted to the target. The system facilitates some pretty neat ways in which to traverse each environment through the use of gliders and jumping pads that can propel you large distances. Admittedly, it does take a while to get used to, but once everything clicks, it soon becomes a real joy. Although not a perfect experience in execution, Super Magnetic Neo offers an incredibly fun experience that to this day still resonates.